Hi, I'm Rob Cosman. Welcome to my shop. The Cosman Workbench. Without a doubt, the most important tool to hand to a woodworker is a workbench. And if you go out and try to buy a good one, you're going to find out they're quite expensive. And if you try to build that same good one, it's quite complicated. I solved both problems. I designed a workbench that is both cheap, sturdy, and easy to build. Stay tuned. I'm going to introduce you to it. I'm Rob Cosman, and welcome to my shop. Here's the three things that I think you have to find in a good workbench. Number one, it needs to be mass. Heavy, doesn't move around on you, nice and stable. Number two, it's got to be flat. This becomes your reference surface. Everything you do is going to be referenced off of that bench top. And number three, you have to have a vise that will securely hold your work so that it doesn't move around on you where you're trying to do something precise. This is my bench. A lot of money involved. And it took a long time and a lot of skill in order to build it. And that's maybe beyond what the average new guy getting into this is going to deal with. So let me show you the Cosman bench and address those same three issues with this. It's made out of MDF and plywood, and I'll get into that a little bit later. But you end up with a top that is 3 inches of MDF, solid, heavy. If you've ever moved a sheet of MDF, you know how heavy it is. Can you imagine something 3 inches thick? It's flat. One of the biggest advantages of MDF is it's nice and flat. It is dimensionally stable, which means it's not going to move like solid wood does. Heavy, flat, and a great vise. The vise we chose to use on this is made by Schoberg. The nicest thing about it is it has a system that allows for the removal of any racking. Racking is when you clamp something on one side and the vise twists, leaving the inside clamped tight and the outside flopping around. That can all be taken out of this, and that vise is, I think it's the best commercially available vise that you can find. It takes about 15 minutes to install. It's absolutely perfect for this particular bench. Now let's go back to my bench and we'll compare and see how the Cosman bench measures up to it. At a fraction of the cost and a fraction of the build time and a fraction of the required skill to build it. My bench is patterned after a Scandinavian style workbench. It's made out of maple and mahogany. A lot of it is bird's eye maple. It has what's called a shoulder vise over here. Nice thing about a shoulder vise is that there are no obstructions. You put a board in there, and when you clamp it, it tightens it all across the width. That means when you're cutting the dovetail out here, there's no vibration. When you're cutting in the middle, there's no vibration. And when you're cutting on this end, there's no vibration. It's fantastic. It has a double start thread, moves really quick, but it's also extremely expensive. Down on this end, you have what's called a tail vise. So there are bench dogs along the length of the bench. And move them up and down. Trap your piece that you're planning to work on in between the two. Holds it firmly, and now sitting on a nice flat bench, you can go in there and plane your work. Nothing moves, nice and solid. It's great. That too is expensive. Again, double start thread, very precise parts. The top made out of maple, it's 3 inches thick, and there's probably in excess of $2,000 in just materials alone, without including the vices. It's heavy, solid, great. All right, I want to tell you a little bit more about the actual construction of this bench, and then we'll try to go toe-to-toe with the Scandinavian bench and see how it measures up. The top is made out of 3 pieces of 1 inch MDF. Now that's not always easy to find. It can be 4 pieces of 3/4 inch. Either way, you're dealing with, at the end, 3 inches of MDF, which is nice and heavy. Those 3 pieces are glued together. We have a system that we have in our video whereby you can do it with 3 or 4 clamps and still come out with a great result. The base, because mortise and tenon joinery, especially on big thick timbers like this, is difficult for someone just getting into this. So the base is actually made out of Baltic birch plywood. Now what's nice about Baltic birch plywood, instead of using inferior materials on the core with just the expensive hardwood on the outside, this has the same material on the outside as it does on the inside. So it's essentially a solid piece of birch. It just happens that every other layer is going a different direction. What I do when I built this is rip that strip into pieces that are approximately 3 7/8 of an inch wide, and then they're cut and glued together, held in place with staples, an inexpensive staple gun, while the glue is setting, but it's like Lego almost. This piece on the outside stops here, and it stops right here. This next piece goes all the way down and all the way up. The next one goes all the way down, all the way up, and this one goes to here, to here. This piece down here is built the same way, except this piece goes all the way over. This piece and this piece stop short here. Another piece picks up from here and goes over, which creates the hole or the mortise that these two pieces go into. All of this is done while you're building the whole thing. The staples simply hold the two pieces together until the glue dries, and a good glue joint results in a joint that is stronger than the wood itself. So you end up coming out with 2 1/4 inch thick birch for your base. Nice and solid. We've got our tool tray, but let's talk about the vise. Because you can have a great, nice, flat, heavy bench, but if you don't have a good vise, then it becomes very difficult to work. So first I'll tell you what we did. Initially, we were going to have 2 vices on here, but those vices are actually more expensive than all of the other material that goes into building the bench. So by removing 1 vise, you substantially reduce the cost of this bench. And we realized that 1 vise could actually do the work of 2. So if you're planing using the 1-inch bench dog, you simply find the setting that you need. Bench dogs, by the way, have a canted face, so you can put them down into a 90-degree hole, and that slight cant forward makes it so that when you tighten it up, it doesn't, your workpiece doesn't pop up. You can go ahead and tighten that in place, and then your work is held securely as you go in and plane or do whatever you need to do. Now, because the bench has the vise on this end, it can also be used for tasks like dovetailing. Now, because it's such a good solid vise, you can actually make the jaw considerably wider. In this case, I've got about an extra, I've got 5 1/2 inches extra on either side. So I can go in there and grab most of this board. Not quite as efficient as the Schoberg vise, but still held, shoulder vise. Still held securely so that there's no vibration. And that 1 vise does the job that would have been done by 2 otherwise. There's 2 bolts on this one side that actually squeeze these rectangular tubes between a couple of phenolic strips, and that's what removes that racking. Fantastic vise. I can't say enough good about it. If you're going to build a bench and you want to do it in a weekend, seriously look at this. Whether you use our design or not, but that vise is number 1. We first designed this bench 5, 6 years ago, and we actually use them now in our classroom. But over the years of building them and working with them, we've made a few changes and added some accessories that made it even easier to work with. The first thing we did that I didn't mention earlier was we have normally just 1 row of dog holes. So if you're a right-handed woodworker, you're going to be planing in this direction. There's no reason to have dog holes over there. But if you're the other segment of the population that are left-handed, it's nice to be able to work on a friendly bench that accommodates a left-handed woodworker. So for the sake of actually drilling another row of holes, you can accommodate left hand or right hand. We put it down underneath here. A piece of plywood with a lip on one side of it gave you a nice space to store tools, work, wood, whatever. It was just an easy and inexpensive way of adding a new dimension or another dimension to this, the utility of this bench. The bench lamp. If you're an older woodworker, there's nothing like having a tunnel light. So we find these lamps at IKEA, and the downside is they have a weak link, which is that piece of the lamp right here. So we solved it by turning what I call a mushroom, which is nothing more than a piece of 1-inch wood. with a head on it, and that fits down into any one of the dog holes so that you can get that lamp exactly where you want it and pour the light on and be able to see everything. On this end, which typically is not an end that sees a lot of use, we're down here dovetailing, we're planing in this direction. This end of the bench really doesn't get used. This is where we put our sharpening station. Now we'll get in another video, we'll talk about how we use this and the whole philosophy behind sharpening at a lower height, but it's nothing more than a piece of plywood glued and screwed onto a piece of hardwood, cantilevered on there, and it works as a great place to sharpen. I typically have all of my gear sitting there all the time, so I'm never more than a couple of steps and a few seconds away from having a sharp edge. Now finally, in thinking about those who woodwork as a hobby and probably have to share a garage with somebody's car, you need some mobility. Well, these are heavy benches, and the casters that were readily available were too light. They would bend under the weight of these benches. The first time you hit a bit of a bump, they'd bend and you could no longer use them. So we bring these in, we have a piece of steel added to them to strengthen them. You put them on there and just step on that lever. And within a matter of a few seconds, and with very little effort, that heavy bench, which by the way is right around 200 pounds, now becomes extremely mobile and you can put it anywhere you need to. It doesn't take much to move it. If you're just getting into hand tools and you've discovered that yes, you need a workbench, and you've gone out and, as I said, found how expensive a good one can be, or how difficult and the amount of tools required to build that same bench, you might want to look at this and look at it seriously. Now to help you, we put together a 4-hour build video. Now what do I mean by that? Well, we didn't leave anything out. We go through the entire process. Nothing is left to the imagination. Some of the details may be overkill, but we'd rather give you more than to give you less. So if you follow the link right here, you can go onto our site, find that build. It'll tell you everything you need to know. There's also plans available with the video, and you can purchase 3-dimensional plans in addition if that's your style of work. If you're serious about hand tool woodworking, you have to have a good bench. I promise you that this bench, in 1, possibly 2 weekends, will have you at a point where you no longer have to worry about your bench. All you have to worry about are learning how to use your tools and be able to create our heirloom quality furniture that you've been looking forward to. If you find this interesting, subscribe to our channel down here in the lower left. Don't forget to hit the bell. That'll notify you whenever we come out with a new video. And in the description, we'll also put a way where you can get connected with our newsletter. It comes out monthly, gives you all kinds of information. Every month there's a theme. There's always 1 or 2 videos specific to that theme, and they're only for the newsletter folks. If you like this and you've got some comments, it's your turn. Tell us what you think. What have you found to be the most important aspect of a workbench? Or if you've already built one of these, tell us about your success. Either way, we'll see you in the shop real soon. If you like my method of work and enjoy my style of teaching, if you click on any one of these videos, it'll help improve some aspect of your woodworking. Now you can do a lot better work, a lot easier if you have good tools. If you click on the picture of the plane and the chisels, it'll take you to our site where you can find our tools, our classes, both online and in person. Don't forget to subscribe, and most of all, enjoy your time in the shop.